Hello, my name is Christopher Leffoltz, and I'm the Vice President of Development, and this is the Development Group Conversation for November 12th, 2020. As always, I like to start with just what's top of mind for me in the last 8 weeks. Primarily, what's been top of mind is OKRs, both Q3 ending and Q4 starting. So we'll cover the Q3 results, and you can also look at the Q4 plans to kind of understand what we're planning to do there. We had a large realignment in our organization this past quarter, and want to talk just briefly about that. Upcoming are performance reviews and transient bugs as part of our Q4 OKR. So both of those are super important to us. And then, as always, our MR rate is something that's top of mind for me, and we'll just talk briefly about that as well. Several other things that you listed there, and you can kind of look at each of those. It's kind of a blend of both people type of information as well as technical challenges the development team is working towards from that perspective. So next thing I'd like to cover is our narrow MR rate. We hit our largest narrow MR rate ever, or probably at least in the last 2 years. It's currently sitting at 11 for September, and that's what we're excited about. We've seen October at a little bit lower from that regard, and in particular the last week of October and then the first week of November were both lower marks, which we think we have a good understanding of, or at least some explanation of. One is that we definitely have been feeling the effects of COVID fatigue with various shutdowns across the world. Also in the US, there's been an election that's been both a distraction and stress for a number of our engineers associated with that. The realignment also has an impact on our overall efficiency, in particular moving those folks from one organization to the other. And then last but not least, to be confirmed, in discussions this morning, we realized that we had some test efficiencies that we were running as part of a Q3 OKR that should have led to smaller MRs and quicker MRs that may have spiked our rates during that period of time. So we're going to continue to dig into that a little bit. Another KPI that I want to highlight is a new KPI which we've included, which is the largest contentful paint. This is how long it takes to get the largest amount of content onto a screen for a customer. And we have 5 initial pages that we've been working on as part of Q3. And in particular, what we now have is a KPI on there for the project homepage associated with a particular user, and we're measuring that for to see how often we are below 2.5 seconds at a 90% rate associated with that. Other pages that we're measuring are issue list, issue detail, MR list, and MR detail. Issue detail will be the main one that needs to be brought down below 2.5 seconds. So that's one that we'll continue to work on as we move into Q4, and we're also going to expand into a few other pages associated with that. Next up, I want to highlight the larger realignment. We decided to move several team members to areas in fulfillment, product analytics, and ecosystem. In fact, it was a realignment, and this was approximately 7.3% of the development organization at large. So this was a fairly large move for our team. We moved in particular faster than normal moves associated with that. In particular, the fulfillment efforts we had to move mid-cycle, which is unusual for us, for our team. So thank you to all team members who are moving. And if you have any concerns or things that you want to share with me or during the group conversation, we'd love to talk about it from that perspective. Another thing to note is there's also, if you don't feel comfortable talking to the group conversation or unavailable at that time, there's a retrospective that we've created to look for additional feedback associated with that. So we appreciate any kind of feedback around that, those efforts associated with it. Next, I'd like to highlight our Q3 OKRs overall for the development organization. Generally speaking, OKRs, we want to have a goal of hitting between 60 and 100%. Happy to report that all our OKRs hit above 60% from an overall perspective. There were a few areas that we were below that, and we'll continue to work on those areas. But in particular, I'd like to highlight some that I'm particularly excited about. In particular, the infrastructure team was able to do some dogfooding with incident management. And even though the security team got to only 50% for security approvals of using GitLab as a dog food product. They found a number of bugs and are working on those now to basically address those so that we can move forward. Similarly, we've seen a number of performance improvements associated with our product where we've migrated a number of HAML component instances to pajamas, and also we're improving LCP performance, as we mentioned before in our KPI. And then last but not least, in our team area, we shipped our first iteration of architecture discipline. If you haven't seen that, please go and look at that because it's useful to understand how we think about architecture, as well as adding MR coaches to increase our community collaboration associated with that. And that's my highlights for this group conversation. There are several slides which I didn't highlight in the interest of respecting your time, but feel free to read through the deck and ask questions, both what's included in the deck and any other questions you may choose. Thanks again, and everybody have a great GitLab day.